video tutorials. So I'm just going to cover one property I needed to touch in CSS before we move to CSS3, and that is the Css Overflow Property. We said the Css Overflow Property specifies the behavior that occurs when an element contains overflow, the element's box. So the overflow property has values. I've talked about it before. So there are 4 values for the overflow property. We have the visible, that's the default value, that's the value that is always there. We have the scroll, the hidden, and the what auto value. So I'm just going to run through this document here. So I'm going to remove all of this here, keep that away. I'm just going to leave an opening and a closing div here. I'm going to leave that. Let me just take this away. Now let me add something in regards to that. So I'm going to call for that div. So I'm going to add a width to it. Notice I just made a div. I didn't write anything in this div. I just left the div open. So I'm just going to call it a div. I say div 150 pixel. Then we have height of 150 pixels. And we have a background color. Let's just give a background color of light blue. Let's call it light blue. And next thing here we have let's just give a float so that it's going to move by the left side. And let's give it an overflow of scroll. Let's save this and minimize this. Open it. Let's see what we have. So what happened is, what the scroll does is that the value scroll results in clip overflow. So but the scroll bar is added so the rest of the content may be seen. So notice the scroll bar has been added. See something? See, there's a scroll bar here. See, the scroll bar has been added. So let's say we added something to our page, like let's say we put something in this div like hello. Okay, I save that. So look at the hello is within. So what the scroll overflow does is that it adds a scroll bar. That okay, let's move forward. Let's say we have an auto. Let's add an auto. We add an auto. What do you think the auto does? The value auto results are clipped. A scroll bar should be added to make it possible to scroll the rest of the content. So let's look at that. Let's look at that. So if I refresh this, okay, I see auto doesn't really come out. Now let's move over to all of that. Let's take away all of that and let's move to CSS3. So what are we expected to study in CSS3? What we expected in CSS3 is that CSS3 is the latest standard of CSS. CSS3 is completely background compatible with early CSS version. That means whatever you're studying with CSS3 is not like it is a new concept entirely, just that it's an advanced method of it. The reason for CSS3 is to take away the workload from JavaScript, because in the first instance JavaScript is what we use for doing animation and all the rest, but with CSS3 now we can take some of that workload away from JavaScript. So what are we expected to study in JavaScript in CSS3? What are the possible added features in CSS3? Border radius have been added in CSS3. CSS never had border radius, but in CSS3 it has been added. We have border image, we have multiple background, we have animation and effects, we have box shadow, we have transparency effect, we have font face, we have word wrap, we have pseudo classes, and we have rounded corners. So those are possibly what we are going to be taking down in this course. So CSS3 also uses vendor prefixes assigned to browsers which don't support the current version of CSS3. So that means if you have a browser which have not been updated, I know some of you don't like updating your browser, which is actually a bad thing. I try to update my browsers as frequent as possible because if a new version of CSS have been designed, and developers move with the trend. So if they are using the new version of CSS or the new version of web technologies, it might not display on your browser. So even if so as a web developer, you are developing your browser, your website, looking at the fact that some people will not update their browsers, and because of that, you can use tools like this WebKit for Chrome or Musk for Mozilla and Firefox browsers. The reason you use them, add them in front of your code, is so that your code can be compactable. So what are we going to be looking at when we start talking about border radius? Under border radius, what we'll simply be looking at border radius, we'll be talking about border radius allow us to create a rounded corner for elements. So we can create a rounded corner for elements. What does the border image help us to do? Border image allow us to specify an image as a border around an element. So what about multiple backgrounds? What do you think we'll do about multiple backgrounds? What multiple backgrounds simply does is that multiple backgrounds applies multiple backgrounds to an element. Animation and effects, we'll talk about the rest and all the rest. So let's jump into our code and let's start coding so you can be able to see that immediately. So what we have here is let's have a box shadow. Let's just have a div. So this is the div of hello. Let's just style it. Let's have a box shadow. Let's say we have a box shadow. Let's begin with box shadow. Let's have a box shadow. Sorry, that's a box shadow. Let's have a box shadow. So let's have something insert. Oh, sorry about this. I didn't call for my div. I need to call my div. Let me call for my div. Then I have box shadow. Box shadow insert. So while using the box shadow property, you need to use the insert. So I'm saying I want to insert the box shadow of okay, notice the way the insert is spelled. It's not spelled with an arrow. 10 pixel by 5 pixel pixel by 100. Okay, so that is that. Definitely, let me just leave this too. So I'm trying to say top and left and right and bottom. Then let me just add a color. So let me just run this right now. Let me save this and refresh my page right now. So this is what actually happened. I see, this is what actually happened. So let me take away this hello from this div. So we don't have that. Now I need to add a color to this. So let me say I'm adding a color of let's say red. Right. So if I save this now and I refresh this now, so you should have. Now you are not seeing it because what I've moved, take away the element. So let me bring back this element. Sorry, hello. So let me add some padding to it. So let's just say we are making it if you have top, let's say we're adding it to, so it's going to have a top, it's going to have a bottom, and it's going to have the top, you're going to have the left, bottom, and the right padding. Okay, so let's just add something like let's add 5. Let's say 5 pixel to 8, 5 pixel red. But let me just add black. The black code is #00. That's simply for black. Let's save this now. Let me refresh this. So this is what I have. This is the box shadow. You can see the shadow over this place. Okay, this is a shadow. You have the shadow there. So let's proceed. So we save time. Let's proceed on that with that. So the next thing we can have over here is we can do box shadow of outer. So we can actually make the box shadow to be outer. So let's say instead of putting insert, let's make the box shadow to be outer. All of these things are all CSS. They are all Css3 properties. So we can make it to be outer. Or let's make it to be outer. Let's say box shadow outer 10. Okay. Let's save this and let's have a grab this. Okay. That's basically what we have out there. So let's move on from there and let's touch on other property. Let's talk about text shadow. Now text shadow simply means, from the word text shadow, means that applying what shadow to the text. So this one I can now decide to use an H1. Let me use an H1 and call it hello. So I'll come over here because it's no longer in a div, so I'll take away all of this on my style CSS. Now remember what I earlier said, you can do your CSS internally. So what we are doing right now, this is internal CSS, and what we can also do is called inline CSS. So I can come here and put something called style. I call it color, I call it red. I see, I call it red. Now if I save this, I'm going to have this red. Are we together? So what I just did here is that what this is what inline CSS. Inline CSS. Inline is inline with what my HTML tags. Now what the one I would do up here, for example, let's say I'm doing, let me take away all of this, take away all of that. So the one up here where we have color, so we need to call our identifier H1. And the one I have up here as color to be red. This is simply what internal CSS. Okay, this is internal CSS. External CSS means that I'm going to have a different page called CSS. So let's do external CSS. So I'm going to create a new page, Control N, new page. And I'm going to call it style. So basically I don't necessarily need to call the style here. So what external CSS does is that when I create it, I'm going to put a link up here. For example, I'm going to say link. I see. So when I link it here, I'll be able to bring out that CSS. But let's leave that apart. So let's concentrate on what we have here. So this is our CSS here. So basically this CSS is internal CSS, and the one we earlier did here was what inline CSS. So but what we are looking at here particularly, we are looking at text shadow. I just need to point out that area. So let's have text shadow. We can use our H1, which is our element we are trying to our selector. So let's H1, let's add the text shadow property. Text shadow. The text shadow property. Text shadow of, let me say 0 pixel. You can play around with it. 0 pixel, 5 pixel, 5 pixel by 3 pixel, 8 pixel, 2 pixel. So I'm going to give it a color. Notice you need to give it a color at the end. So the color I want to give is, let's give the color yellow. So let's say yellow. Let's save that and let's see the outcome. Okay, you can see there's a text shadow right here, and this is the yellow color showing. Okay, let's say we give it a color of red. Save that. Prefixes. Are you seeing this is the red shadow? And you can play around with this. You can change it to every 7. Save it. You play around with it and see the one that fits your needs. See. So just play around with that. Let's move ahead from that. Let's move ahead to the next one. We have so let me just point out something. This 0 pixel, the first value, whatever first value you put here is I can put 5 there. Whatever first value you put there is classified or is known as what the X offset. Let me just spell this here. It's known as the X offset. Okay, so X offset, and whatever value you put at the second here, at the second 5 pixel, is considered to be what the Y offset. So the next one, the 7 is considered to be what the blur property. Blur, B-L-U-R, blur property. And the last one is actually your color. So the first one is the X offset, the next one is the Y offset, and the third one being, in our case, is 7 pixel, is the blur. So blur is actually the blur. Do you know the blur effect, right? So the last one is actually the color. So the first value you put, know that value is going to represent the F offset, and the second value is going to represent the Y offset, and the third value is going to represent, that's numerical value, is going to represent the blur, and the last is going to be the color. Let's move to another property called the word wrap property. What does the word wrap property actually do? The word wrap property allows long words to be broken and wrapped into next line. That means, you can write a very long, lengthy word, but you can actually break it down so that it can be displayed in the next line. It takes two values, normal and word break word. Using the normal word, the words but does not break it also. So let's see all of that. Let's have an example of that. So let's say we're having a word wrap of let me get a Lorem if some text here and generate an Lorem. Okay, so let me use this Lorem if some generator. It's just a simple word. So let me take all of that. Are you seeing? Now notice this word is too long. See, it's too lengthy. If I have to save this code right now and I refresh it, are you seeing how lengthy it is? It is going all the way. See, it's going all the way to the end of the browser. Now I can actually break this with CSS. So what I can do is that, let me take away that, let me undo that. Now let me put a paragraph here. So let me put a paragraph. Let me use a paragraph here. Let me put Lorem inside here. So this is Lorem. Lorem is simply a text where we use to generate, it's just like a default text generator in a browser, or probably in any web processing software. It's like an automatic text generator. Instead of me thinking of what to write to you, so I can just use Lorem to generate random text. It doesn't make any sense. Okay, so let me do word wrap so you can be able to see that now. So we are moving over to our CSS. Now I would have loved to do inline CSS, but inline CSS has limitations, so try not to be doing inline CSS. So I can add a width. It doesn't necessarily mean I need to add a width. Okay, so I can add a width. Let's just say a width of 210 pixels. I can add a height to it. Let's say height of 100 pixels. 100 pixels. And sorry, my height is misspelled. Next thing I can add here is that I can add a border. So I want to add a border so you can be able to see. That's why I'm trying to put all of this. If I don't add a height, if I don't add a border, you will not be able to see it, to see what's going to display. 1 pixel. Let me add a border, 1 pixel solid. Now in terms of border properties, you can either use solid or you can use maybe rich. See, rich. Let's say rich black. Let's go black. I've said black means hatch sound and hatch sign and 00, or you can just simply go and spell the black. It's the same thing. Okay, so now let's just run this code as it is right now. Let's have our code and see what we have here. Now there's something changed here, but you wouldn't really notice it. Okay, let's move now the next thing to, let's add our word wrap. For word wrap of, let's call it word break. I said word wrap uses two values, the word break and the normal. So if I save this right now and I run this, okay, let's have a look at our code over here. Let's have a look at our code. So let's have it change to let's increase this. Let's make it 2. Please, let me save that. Now what in essence this does is that, let me take away this word wrap, take away it and save my code. And let me show something. Now what the word wrap is supposed to simply do is that, in essence, is that if your text is too lengthy that it goes all the way to the end of the browser, you can use a word wrap to break it down. So this thing has actually been broken to a degree. Okay, so the word wrap is going to wrap everything in between this text. Okay, so let's say I'm taking away this I'm taking away all of this. Yes, I'm taking away all of that. I'm bringing the word wrap back. Now let me save this. I see our code. It's very lengthy. Okay, So that is that about the word wrap. Let's move ahead so we can be able to save time. So what the word wrap simply does is to wrap up your text so your text does not become too lengthy. Let's look at gradient. What does gradient simply mean? Gradient simply means the background, a color combination of a combination of colors make up gradients. So what type of gradient do we have? We can have linear gradient and what radial gradient. Linear gradient simply means a combination of colors in a linear pattern, and radial gradient simply means a combination of colors in a radial form. Okay. Okay, so let's look at an example so we can see the gradient function into action. But before I get into that, I feel like touching one other section called the background size property. So the background size property, we have touched multiple backgrounds. Let's talk about the background size property. Background size property. Let's have a background size property. So this property adds what? More functionality to all the CSS that allow us to specify the size of background images using what? Either length or percentage. E.g. what? A div. So e.g. let's use a div. So let's come here and use a div. Let's take away the text here. Let's take away all of this. So let's create a div for ourselves. Let's create an empty div and just an empty div. And let's try to use that empty div to explain what we mean by background size property. Let's just give it a height. Let's call it div. Let's call it div out. Let's give it a height of whatever you feel like giving. Let me give my 100 pixel. 100 pixel. Let's give it a width. Let's give it a width of let's say 100 pixel. A width of oh sorry, I said weight. Oh my god. Let's go back to the other section. Okay, not here, please. Oh my god, I said weight, not width. It's width. Let's give it a width of 10 megapixel. So 100 megapixel, sorry. Then let's have a border. Let's have a border of I said you can use reach, 1 pixel reach. Let me use reach this time around. Or you can use dash. There's also a dash. So like let's call it red so you can be able to see more. Then we can have a background. Now notice what I'm going to do here is that I'm going to add an image here. Now I'm going to add an image, and what I'm going to do is that I'm going to use an image that is on the desktop to add. So I'm going to add an image, and the way we add an image in HTML is that what? A background. Use what? Background property, background. Then use what? Use URL. See the URL. Then you put the name of that image inside here. So this is what it's trying to tell me. That on my desktop, these are the images I have. These are the images I have. So I can decide to choose any of these images. I can maybe decide to choose let me see what image do I have here. These are the images on my desktop. I don't have any cool image on my desktop. Let me go to my desktop and probably pick a wallpaper from inside the folder. Let me take a wallpaper from here. Let me copy this wallpaper. Okay, let me copy another wallpaper too. Okay, so let me have this wallpaper here. Since our document is on the desktop, so we can be able to access that. So this one is called coding. So I have to check the properties to make sure it's what it ends with .jpg or .png. So it ends with what? .jpg. It ends with what? A .jpg. So it ends with a .jpg. So let's move over to this so we can be able to access it from here now. So I can add coding. It's called coding.jpg. I see. I brought that image because the image must be in the same location as what your HTML text. Now, if I run this image as it is now, I save my code. and run my code as it is now. I see what I have. Notice what happened here. I am able to add a height. This is the height. I told my image to take a height of 100 pixels and a width of 100 pixels, and I give a background reach of what? Of 1 pixel. Let me change this background reach of, let me say, put it 5 pixels, and let's go back there. If I refresh this, look at what happened. So let me change the reach to maybe solid. Let me make it a solid. Remember I said you can change the border to maybe solid or reach or dash. Look at what happened to solid. Solid is completely strong. Let's change it to maybe dash. Dashed. Okay, let me save that. I see what happened to dash. Okay, so that's simply that about that. So if you like the dash, let me just leave it there. So I can decide to put something like no repeat. No repeat. Now the reason I'm putting this no repeat property is simply because our background, there are some cases where the background will want to repeat. So I can decide to say no repeat. So the background does not repeat. Okay, and it should not repeat by 50%. 50%. So I'll close that now and save that and refresh that. So I see the background should not repeat itself. So the background will stay the same, because there are some cases where if I just put the background will end up occupying half of the page and still repeat again over and over. So it end up just being truncating the whole environment. Half here, the same image. So when I say no repeat, that means I say it should not repeat, and I need 50% of it. So I can still take away this 50%. Alright, let me just save this by the way it is now. So what we have there is that what the background will not repeat. Same thing. Okay, let's move ahead to we can give it a background size, because that's what we're interested over here. So we can have a background size. Have a background size of whatever you like to use. So we can use a background size of 100 pixel. 100 pixel. That means you are trying to say that what your background to occupy a space of 100 pixels. That's what Css you are trying to say. So I'm going to save this and rotate. I see it's taking, your background is taking. That means let me break it this way so you understand now. If your image is big enough to be, let's say 500 megapixel. So when you say background size of 100 pixels, you're trying to say that what your image out of the 500 megapixels, there, the size of your image should be able to fit inside that border you have created, inside this border of 5 pixels and the height of 100 pixels. Your image should be able to fit out of the 100 pixel size of your image. Your image should be able to fit by 100 pixels. Okay, I just hope you understand me. We also have background size of contain. We can also put a background size of contain. So we don't have background size, so you must not specify the background size. You can also put another background size called contain. So if I run this right now, save this. Background size of contain. Are you seeing this background size of contain? We can also have background size of cover. What do you think cover is going to do? It's going to cover, right? Yeah. So let's have a background size of cover. I refresh this. I see the background size must fit the height. So if you like, I increase the height to maybe let's say I put the height to be maybe 250, and I put maybe the width to, let's say, 200, or maybe let's say 200. Sorry, mistakenly press Ctrl N. So let's say I have 200 here. Now if I save this, because I'm putting background cover, the cover too will completely follow. See, it will automatically follow and cover, because I've said that what the background was to what background size to what cover the page. Okay, that's that about background size. Let's move ahead to the next property. We'll talk about the background clip property. All of this we are talking about properties in CSS3. The background clip property, it specifies the painting area of the word, the background. This property takes 3 values. And what are the values? You can have the border box, you can have the padding box, you have the contain box. So let's just have an example here. Let's allow this div. So let me take away all of this. Let me take away all of that. So I'm still working with this div. So the next property we are talking about here is let me just write it over here so you can be able to see that. So we are talking about the background clip property. Background clip property. So let's have the background clip property. So we are going to identify our div. So let's have our border. Remember I said the reason we put a border so that we can be able to see where the effect is coming from. Let's use a border of dash, or let's just say use a border of 2 pixels. Notice you must put the size, how big the border should be. Then what type? And there's another border type called dotted. So it can either be dotted, or it can be dash, or it can be solid, or it can be rich. So let's try dotted this time around. Dotted black. Let's call it dotted black. And let's have a padding. I said padding simply means the spaces you give. Padding of 20 pixels. And let's have our background. So what should our background be? A background of light blue, probably light blue. And let's have our background clip. Now this is the background clip. Okay, let's just run this bit as it is right now, see what we have. So this is what we're going to have. Listen, this dotted, this is a dotted border, and this is the height of what we put the height of what okay, padding. So this is a padding of 20. The reason for this padding, remember I put 20 padding. What this 20 padding simply does is that it has automatically given 20 padding from the top, 20 padding from the left, 20 padding from the right, and 20 padding from the bottom. That's what have simply happened here. So now you might be asking, now what's the meaning of 20 padding from the bottom? Is this space not too big like this to the end of this page? Now if I decide to add something here, let's say I decide to put h1 under here, and I call it h1, I say h1, and I put something like hello in this h1. The spaces between the hello and this div in front will be 20 pixels. Let me save that. Okay, I'm going to save that. Let me refresh this. Are you seeing where this hello is? Between this hello and this box on top here is 20 pixels. 20 pixels is here because we spent 20 pixels top, left, bottom, and right. That's what we said. So all around that box, the spaces in between. So there's 20 space here, there's 20 space in between here, and there's 20 space here at the top, and there's 20 space at the bottom. So everything around this box must give it a space of what? 20. Okay, are we together? Now let me take away this hello. We're not concerned with that. I just need to touch or portray on that point. Now let's have a background. Okay, we have seen that. Let's add a background clip I was talking about, but that's what we are interested about. Background clip. So background clip, we are looking at what? The padding box. Look at other properties. So we can have a border box. Let's go for border box first. Let's go for that border box. Let's refresh this. I see it didn't really change here. Let's have something called padding box. We're having a padding box. Let's save this. I see. We are padding the box, so the box completely fits up. The next thing we should have here is let's try other properties. Let's try other properties here. Let's try other properties like let's try content box. Let's try content box. So you can be able to see the various elements. See, so the content box occupy the whole space there. The background clip, So that's the background clip property we're talking about. So the background clip, the padding box occupy that. So as the content box. So we are saying that the content should contain in that box. So as the background clip. So when we go to padding box, use padding box. Padding. As padding box. Okay. Let's look at the case where we didn't have this. Like that. So let's undo that. So remember I said under border you can actually change this border to probably solid. So border can be solid, it can be rich, it can be dotted, it can be dashed. So let's have it solid. This is a solid border. Okay, let's move away from that while we are trying to make sure the video is not too lengthy. Okay, let's move away from that. Now there's something I want us to point at. The background clip property also works with image. We can also add an image instead of adding a background color. Now instead of adding this background color, we can also add a background image. Let's say we have a background image, so we can add a background image. Now a background image, so this is how we add a background image in CSS. Background image, then the URL means resource, universal resource locator, so it's going to locate that. Remember, the image we have is called what? Coding.jdp .jpg. So I'm going to click on that. So if you are using VS Code is a very good browser. It helps you do that. So as a background, sorry, my image didn't really pop out there. So let me specify my image. Now let me pick out my image properly. So coding.jpg. So let me save that. Now notice what happens. So in that space where we have my image right now, we use a text color, a background color there before. So instead of using the background color, we can decide to use an image there. So this is what happens right now. Okay, so it may be probably you can decide to give it a height. If you wish to give it a height of maybe 100, let's say 150 pixels. You can give it a width, also 150 pixels. Save that, run that. Okay, so you can see that properly. Okay, that is that about that. Let's look at multiple backgrounds. Remember, we are using our PowerPoint slide here. We'll talk about multiple background. Let's look at multiple background. What does multiple background does? Multiple background can also add images. So multiple background images specify using comma separated list of values. Now let's see that. So we are still working with our div element here. Let's work with our div elements. I'll take away everything here. Take everything. We are still working with our div element, so we can add a width. Let's add a width of 400 pixels. Add a height of let's add a height of probably 300 pixels. 300 pixels. Have a height of 200 pixels. Then we have a background image. A background image of our image is coding. That's what we are using. Background image. Now we can also have a second image because we are talking about multiple images. So what I do is that I'm going to press the tab key and I'm going to come under here. I'm going to give some space. So URL multiple image. Are you seeing? So we can have multiple image URL. I can have a multiple image here. I can have multiple image. So the next image I want to pick out here is coding one. Let me use coding one. Coding one. Okay, let me take all of that so you can. Let me just take all of this out so you can be able to see what I'm saying first. Now let me run this at the moment. I know you can be able to visualize how it's going to be. This is how it's going to be because there's no border to it as it is, so you can't really specify that. So let's move ahead. So I'll point at something here. Let's have a background position. Background position. So the background position can be right, bottom, comma, and left top. Like I said, play around with this thing. It doesn't mean the same value I'm using you can use. You can decide to put the position in terms of numbers. Maybe pixel, understand? In terms of numbers. So the next thing we have here is let me run this code as this, so you can be able to visualize it. Okay, this is what we have here. Notice what we are trying to say. We are saying that the background, we are working with the background. We are saying the background position. This is what the background position should look like. the background position. We can put the background to no repeat. We can add those properties inside. So just play around with them. Just play around with them. Now we are still working with that. We are still working with that. Now the second property, I'm going to take away this. Okay, that. Let's move ahead. So the next thing I want us to talk about is opacity property. I'm sure all of us have used opacity. Opacity means simply like a blur or an increase in brightness or a reduction in brightness. That's what opacity. I can break opacity down in simply definition. Now let me play an opacity with images here. Let's use CSS to play around with opacity. Let's say we're trying to use our HTML to become as our Photoshop. Let's try to use HTML as a Photoshop. So let's say we made this div right now. Let's say we made this div and we made the first div. We made a div or we added an image in CSS. Let's just take away this image. Let's call something called. Let's have a div, and call it class. Div class image. Let's call it img1. Now inside this class, let me get an image source. So let me locate that my image. So my image is what? Coding. Now this is me adding image using what? I'm adding image using HTML. So with adding image using HTML, I have to use all of the img tag. So I'll copy this and make another part of this. So let me add another one. But I'm going to change this one to be maybe image2. And I'm going to change this name to be image coding 1 because I have two of these images on my desktop. You can have a view of it here. I have two of these images, one coding 1 and coding itself. So I'm moving over to here. Now if I save it as it is now and I refresh my page, I'm going to have two images coming up. There are two images here. If I maximize my page here, there's another image, but the other image has been hidden. Okay, the other image has been hidden downward, so I can't really bring it out. Okay. So I found the issue here. The issue is like I earlier said, these are mistakes that we can make as developers. And what are the mistakes? For example, if I check the property of this image is PNG. Okay, it's actually JPG. So this one is actually, check the properties, JPG. So if the extension is wrong, your image will not come out. So this is it, coding 1 and coding 2. So what I can actually do is that I can put an opacity now. I can put an opacity to my images. Okay, I can put an opacity to my image. Let's say I can put an opacity to my image. I can come now under style. Remember I said once you use CSS to be able to perform a little bit of Photoshop. So I can come to my CSS. Since I called it class, I'll decide to use a dot. So when you call a class, you identify by a dot. If you call an ID, you identify by what? The hash sign. So since I call it a class, I put dot img1 image 1. I open, I put that. I see. Now I'm going to set opacity of what? Of 1, and I save that. Notice what's going to happen to my image. Opacity of 1 have been applied there, but it's not really visible. So let me use a digit so you can see it more visible. Let's say opacity of 0.5, and I save this. I see opacity of 0.5. It has reduced, the brightness has reduced, opacity has reduced the visibility. Let me say opacity of 0. Let me use 0.25. Now you see what happened. It has reduced visibility even more. Okay, so play around with that opacity property. Let's move around so we can be able to save time and prevent the video from being too lengthy. The next thing I want us to talk about, let's talk about Css3 Transition. So Css3 also does transition. Like if you have used PowerPoint before, PowerPoint has transition properties like this. Say transition property. This is a transition property. Are you seeing what's happening right now on cover? These are transition properties. You have seen them in PowerPoint before. Now we can apply most of these transition properties that we have seen in PowerPoint in CSS. Now, what are transition properties we can apply? We can apply when applying transition in CSS3. The things we need to take into note is that we need to take note about the transition property. And what does the transition property does? It specifies the property to be transitioned. We need to take note of the transition duration, which specifies the duration over which transition should occur. Then we need to take note of transition timing function, which specify how the pace of the transition changes over time, and also transition delay, which specifies a delay in what seconds for the word transition effect. So all of these things I've said may not make sense to you right now unless I put it into action. Okay, so I have my div, so I'm just going to make an empty div here. We have a div here. Okay, let's have a div here. So I'm going to take away all of this. Let's have a div. So what I'm going to add here first is I'm going to call for this div, as we all know already. I'm going to call for this div. I'm going to add a width to the div. I'm going to give a div a width so they can be able to. The reason I add this width and height so you can be able to see where it is defined. So a width of, let's say, 50 pixel. 50 pixel. I'm going to add a height to it, a height of 50 pixel too. Height of 50 pixel. So please don't watch me code. Try to practice this, okay? There's no amount of you watching me code can actually make you a better web developer or a programmer. You have to practice it. So don't just watch me, practice it. Let me add a background color so we can be able to see when something begins to change. What's a background color? Background color of so let's just go with light blue. Then let's have something like let's have a transition. Now I'm going to add a transition. So I said what transition simply does is that transition specifies a duration. So transition when I'm going to have a transition. So I'm going to have a transition. So I'm saying transition to be what? Transition should have a width of what? Transition should have a width. Transition. Or let me just go with transition 30 seconds. 30 seconds. Let me save that so we have this. So this is what we just created right now. Transition have 30 seconds. Now I'm not done. So the next thing I'm going to have is I'm going to have a div hover. I'm going to do this type of thing. So I'm going to say whenever I hover over that, this is what should happen. A div hover. Hover simply means taking your mouse over the element. Div hover should have a width of so whenever I go close to it, what the hover property can actually do is that the hover property can actually change color. Whenever I take my mouse over it can change color, it can change the background, it can actually move the text, it can actually increase size, it can actually decrease size. Okay, so let me say the hover. So whenever I hover over my text, let the size increase to what? 250 pixels. Notice the original width is what? 50 pixels. But whenever I hover my mouse over, it's going to increase size to 250 pixels. Now let's just have our code saved. So whenever I go over here now, if I refresh this, look at it. If I over here, I see what happened. And it's looking like a magic to you right now. So whenever I hover over here, it will increase to what? 250 pixels. Now if I have to take away this transition, let's see what's going to happen. If I hover, I see. If I hover, it automatically just increase size. But the reason I put that transition, the transition is to say that what? In what way should it change? Should it change within 5 seconds? Let me increase the second. Let's say 6 seconds. So it's going to be more slower now. See. I see. It's taking longer time to go for it. Are we all seeing this now? So the original size is 50 pixels. That's the width. This is the width we specify here, 50 pixels. But whenever I hover over here, it's going to increase the size to what? Increase the size to what? 250 pixels. So you can just play around with it. I can also say that if I hover over it to change the background color to maybe red maybe. You can save that. So when I hover over, so sorry, I've not refreshed that. Whenever I come over here, it's changing the color to what? Red. Hope we are all seeing this. So you change the color to red. Okay, I can also add height. I can say when I hover over, let the height change to maybe 250 to 250 pixels. Save that. Come to my code, refresh. So whenever I hover here, I see the height increases and the width also increases. See. Okay, let's play around with that. Now let's add a timing function. That was a duration function. Now there's something also you can also add. Okay, let me say I added width here. Now if I just leave this transition, what happened to this transition if I don't add a width here? That the transition would increase both in width and also in height. If I say width, if I specify that only the width will change by that, you notice that the transition will change only by the width and the height will not be respected. You see. Okay, so that's that. It's kind of like confused because I put this height here. So if I take away this height here and I break it this way, see, it's going to increase only within that width. Okay, so please play around with the code. Now let's add a timing function. So the things we can add in timing function, in transition timing function, is that we can specify the speed. So timing simply specify the speed. Yes, before I forget, let me mention this. I said earlier that we can use a WebKit or a Musk. The reason you use that because your browser may not support that. So you can still take all of this, just take all of this code, copy this, copy that code, bring it over here, add a WebKit transition. I see. The reason I'm adding this WebKit is saying that what in case somebody who is going to run my website, he has not upgraded his browser, let this small property I just put here, this one I'm going to highlight, let it configure that old browser to be able to do CSS3. Like I said, people don't update their browsers, and because of that, if the new language have been updated, CSS works with your browser, so it might not be able to implement its function. That's why I'm going to put this, that in case I run my website, people who are using old browsers should be able to have this transition work on their browser. So I'm going to take that because my browser is updated. But please don't forget, in case of you are using Firefox, let me undo that. You can use Mux. So you can put this, you can see put this and see copy this and put this again. So you can maybe add here, you are going to add Mux. I see. So you can add Moz. Moz works with Mozilla Firefox browsers and other browsers, while WebKit works with Chrome and Safari. So either way, use any of their both. Make sure you use them, because if you are creating a website, multiple people are going to come with several types of browsers. So you're going to make sure your website is able to work with them. So let's speed up and use make time useful for us. The next one we have is property. So when we're talking about transition timing functions, we mention things like we mention things like in, we mention things like out, we mention things like in out. Also mention linear constant speed throughout the animation. Now finally we have a cubic bullseye, which allows you to define. Okay, let me stop talking about all of that and let me just move into action so you can be able to see all of that. Remember when we were doing transition here, transition effect, let's use ease here. Let me use ease. So let me use ease. Okay, let me say ease. I'm using ease. Let me save that. Let me refresh this. I see what happened with ease. Okay, let me just say ease and let me specify the time. Ease 6 seconds. As ease. Let me use ease in. Let me use ease in. Make sure I save that. So ease in. Let me refresh this. Now look at what happened to ease in. It changes. Okay, now let me use the next one. I should use probably as, let me try ease out. Let me use ease out. Ease out. So I have ease out here. Refresh this. Is out. So play around with those transition timing properties, or research more on them. Transition timing functions. You can only become a better coder if you do research and don't depend on one source. I've said it before and I keep on saying it again. Research, make research, take on challenges, and some challenges which I'll be dropping to. So let's move to the next one. CSS transform. So CSS3 can actually transform. So what does transform do? It allows you to translate, to rotate, to scale, and to skew elements. So using the negative value will rotate elements counterclockwise, while what using the positive value will rotate what? Clockwise. Now let's talk about multiple transform. We have things like multiple transform and all the rest. Now let me talk about transform. Okay, let me use transform here so we can be able to see this. Let's transform this. So let's use transform. So let's just say transform rotate. So I'm going to say rotate by 45 degree. Notice I said degree. Now if I leave it as it is and I save this now, notice what I'm going to have here. So I see whenever I hover there, it's in. I see. Now I don't obviously need this, so let me just take away the hover, and if I save this, my code eventually transforms. I see my code eventually transforms into like 45 degrees. So you can change it, maybe say 60 degrees, or you can even put it 90 degrees. So save that. Save that. Refresh. This is going to be for 90 degrees. Wait for 90 degrees. So another property we can also do is that we can also add a translate. We can also add translate. So we can say translate by 100 pixel. Okay, that's translate. It may not really show out. That's the translate property. So that's the few things we have in transform and translate. So just play around with that. So the next thing we are moving on to is CSS animation. What can we do with CSS animation? Can CSS actually animate? Can we do animation effects with CSS? We have seen a bit on transform and skew. So can we apply all of that to making an animation? What does CSS animation actually do for us? What CSS animation actually does is that an animation lets an element gradually change from one style to another. So we can use the keyframes to hold the styles, while the elements will have certain times to change. Okay, so let's play around with some certain code here. So we have a div already. This is a div already. So I'm going to take away all of this. I'm going to take away all of that. So the first thing we are going to use is we are going to introduce what we call the R keyframe. The R keyframes. Okay, the R keyframes. So I'm going to start by saying the R keyframe box. R keyframe box. Then I'm going to say 0 degree when it is from 0 degree. From 0 degree, sorry, let me take away that. From 0 degree, the background color should be let's say background color should be red. Let's go red. Then when you get to 50 degree, the background color should be blue. I'm struggling with colors. Not really a color person. Not really good with colors actually. So at 100%, the background color should be okay. Let's say yellow. Okay. So that's basically that. So I can save that. Let me save this now and let's see what happens. Now nothing actually happens here. Do you know why nothing happened? Because we have not specified the width and the height. So let's go back and let's pick our div. Let's pick our div now. So we need to pick our div. Let's pick our div and give it a width of let's say 150 pixel, a height of 150 pixel too, and let's say have an original color of let's say orange. Sorry about that. Okay, so welcome back. I just had to pause the video. So okay, now we are back, and the last section we were still doing that. We are still on animation. So say animation allows animation. CSS allows animation of HTML elements without using JavaScript or Flash. Because I said CSS3 is an upgraded version of that. Now the things we need to take note here is that we need to take note of the R keyframe. We take note about the animation name. We need to take note about the animation duration, the animation delay, animation iteration count, animation direction, animation timing function, animation field mode, animation itself. Those are the basic things we'll be talking about here. These are basic things we'll be having a hand to touch. So let's say we are having so those are the basic things we'll be having here. Okay, now let's just have a simple code on that so we can be able to run something. So we have a div already waiting for us, so let's just add some codes to it so we can perfect our animation. We have a div, and we add a width to it. We add a width of 100 pixels. Let's add a height 100 pixels. So let's add a background color of, let's say, red. Background color. Let's add animation. So the animation should have a name. Animation name. So I can call it let's just call it anything. Animation name. Let's just call it, okay, you can call it by name. You can call it Brandon, or you can call it your name if you are doing an example. So let's call it animation duration. So the animation duration should be for 4 seconds. Remember, we're trying to do animation with CSS3, so I can save that right now, but that will not work because I need to add a keyframe. We said we are using the R keyframe to work with what? Animation, R keyframes. So I need to use the R keyframes. So now I need to call this animation name called Brandon over here. I need to call this Brandon over here. So I need to say Brandon. Now I'm going to say from the background, color red. Are you seeing what's happening? To the background color yellow. I know most of you have already understood what's going to happen here. Okay, so I'm done with that. I saved my code. Now when I did this, notice what's happening. Take a look at what's happening. I'm going to maximize this. If I refresh this, notice what's going to happen. It's going to change from the background color red to the background color yellow. You see, right? Okay, so that is that. Let's have a change of it. Let's say we are saying let's change it from red. Let's make it blue. I know that's somebody's favorite color, so I'm using your favorite color, blue, and let's save that. Refresh this. Notice it changed from blue to what? Yellow. Okay, so that is that about animation. That is that about animation. But there's something more we can do to that animation. We can make it more interesting. We can make an animation even more interesting. We can actually add percentage. Okay, we can also, instead of it for it to change just between one color to the other, we can actually make it to increase color. So let's say let's remove all of this. Instead of changing from blue to yellow or from what color to the next color, we can actually make it in terms of percentage, like what we're trying to do earlier. So we can say 0%. From 0%, let the background of 0%, the background color should be red. Okay, it should be red. Red. The next thing is, okay, at 25%, let the background color too. Background. Let the background color be choice. Let's go with yellow, right? Yellow. I'll just copy all of this so we don't have to be writing this over and over again. So I watch 75. So we're adding 25 by 25 on top of 25. So let the background color be what color should we put here? Let's have the background color to be, since we have used blue earlier, so let's go with red. No, we have used red. Okay, let's go with okay, let's go with blue. Okay, let's go with we have used red already because our initial background color is red. So, and the first background color starts with red, so the next background color, so this initial color is red, so that means the first color here should be not be red, it should be blue, because the initial color was, see, our background color here, our highlight is blue, so it should begin at 0% with blue, then move to yellow, then probably to red. So when it's at red now, from red now we can go to 100%. Let's have a background color of let's say green. Let's have a background color of green, and let's save this background color of green. Now if I save this now, and if I go back to my code, refresh, I see what happened. If I refresh again, notice from 0% is going to change the background color from what? Red. When you get to 25%, it's going to change at what? At the color to what? Yellow. When you get to 50%, it's going to change the background color to what? Blue. And when you get to 100%, it's going to change the background color to what? Green. So if I refresh that again, take a look at it. Okay, that is that. So play around with the code, play around with that. You can actually, if you want to see it in a slower way, you can try and increase the seconds. Okay, maybe 8 seconds. Save your code, 8 seconds, and refresh that. It's going to take more slower time, I see, for you to be able to see the color. Maybe in case you want it to become bigger, you can increase the width. Say make the width, maybe say 200, and make the height to be maybe the same 200. Make sure you save your code and refresh this so it becomes more bigger. You can be able to see. Okay, so that is that about the animation. So there are many things you can actually do with that animation. There are many things you can actually do with that. Many things you can play around with that code. Okay, there's one that just came to my mind right now, which I intended on doing, but I'm looking at our time right now. Okay, let me just do that. Let's just add an animation duration of 4 seconds. Let me just do one so we can wrap up. Animation delay. Give me an animation delay of let it delay by -2 seconds. I want us to do something interesting. Now let it delay by -2 seconds. Now there's something to add here. Instead of it to become blue, So from 50 seconds, let it do a left of 0 pixel, and a top of, let's do a top of 0 pixel too, 0 pixel, a top of 0 pixel, 0 pixel. So I'm going to make sure it enters all inside of here. So from this one, let's say let it do a left of 200 pixel. Let's do a left of 200 pixel, comma, and a top of let's say 0 pixel. What we are simply trying to do is I want our animation to move. It should not just be static within that same position. Let it be able to at least move by itself. Sorry. So let's have it a left of next one. Let's have a left of I'm looking at a left of 200 pixel again. Let's just go 200 pixel, and then the top to be 200 pixel. Let's say 200 pixel. Please hope you're following up. If there's any question, let me know on the personal WhatsApp group. Like I said earlier, this video is intended for Skill Up 2021 designer, web design and programming student. Just in case you are fooling around and you are just a normal user on YouTube and you find this video, please feel free to grab the content that is in it and let me know too if I can be of help to you. But it was intended for Skill Hub students. Okay, so we can add a left of 200 pixel by 200 pixel, and the last 100 pixel by the next one. The last one we can add maybe 0 pixel by 0 pixel. So we'll come back. Let's say 200 pixel by 200 pixel. Okay. 200. Okay. The first one was 0 pixel by 0 pixel. The second one is supposed to be 0 pixel by 0 pixel by 20 pixel, and the next one. Okay. First one was 0 pixel by 0 pixel. The next one is 20 pixel by 0 pixel. The next one is supposed to be 20 pixel by top 200 pixel. And the last one here, which is okay. I noticed something. Our animation never had the earlier side. Okay, we didn't have an 100% section. We have a 100% section. We had background color. So background color should be black. Sorry, I'm adding this right now so we can make our animation a bit more better. Then we're saying that why it is black here. Oh, we had a background. Sorry about this. So it's at 200 pixel now. 200 by 200 pixel. The next one, let me end it to come back to 0 pixel to 200 pixel, and let me bring it back to, we had a 0% to 25% to 50%. Okay, we didn't have a 50%. Okay, that means I'll just copy this and I'll add it here. Remember, notice we had 25% here, we had 0%, 25%, 100%, and so we're supposed to have a 75%. So let's say in the case of 75%, let's make the color to be black. So in our code, the code we earlier on, we did have 75% because it wasn't necessary. So we did have 25%. So let's say the left to go maybe 200. It should come. Okay, let me copy this. Remove this. It's here. Okay. Sorry, I'm making the code a little bit more complicated right now. So there's a mix up along the way. Okay. So let's add something here. So this one, let's begin to reduce down to maybe from 0 pixel. To 200 pixel, and that's okay. So the last one, now we can finally return back to 0 pixel. Notice we started at 0 pixel, so we should return back to 0 pixel. So we can have a left at 0 pixel, left at 0 pixel, a left at 0 pixel, and a top at 0 pixel too. Close all of that. And the top at 0 pixel. So the left is at 0 pixel. So let's take a look at our code and make sure everything is in place, properly arranged. So let's save this and refresh. This is what we should have. Okay, now let's reduce this to 100 so we can see it in a more smaller scale of angle. This is what we have. Okay, so that is that about animation. So you can please play around with animation. And there's how we can actually add something. There's something else we can actually add called animation iteration count. So let's talk about animation iteration count. What animation iteration count will do is that animation iteration count, what it will do is that we can make it to be infinite. That means forever our loop with our animation will keep on working, it will not end. Notice something. It will keep on doing like that. It will not come to an end because we have said that what the animation to be infinite. So it will keep on animating, changing color. No, it will not come to an end. Okay, so please play around with the code. So the next sections we need to talk about here is the next sections we need to talk before we wrap up this video is we need to talk about the CSS filter. So let's talk about CSS filter. You know, filters is what you are mostly common and you have heard about it when you're talking about video editing or when you snap the phone, your camera, you have your iPhone filter, your Android filter. So let's talk about how we can actually make filter with CSS. So what's a filter? A filter property lets you apply graphical effects like blurring or coloring shifting to an element. Filters are commonly used to adjust the rendering of images, background, and borders. Image filtering is useful. It's actually useful when you want to have different styling for the same image. So instead of uploading multiple images to the website, you can upload only one image and define virtual effects using filter properties. So we have filter properties like blur, we have filter properties like brightness, we have filter properties like contrast, we have filter properties like drop shadow, like grayscale, hue rotate, invert, opacity, saturate, and sepia. So let's just have a look at drop shadow and see what drop shadow will do. So notice we must have an image. So we must have an image. So I'm going to have an image tag img. So I'm going to call my image here coding.jpg. Coding.jpg. So I'm going to save this. So I'm going to save this right now. So refresh, see my image has come up. So my image has no width, has no height, so it's just big all over the, it's just big like that, occupying the whole space. So what I need to do is that I need to identify my image. I need to select my image img, then I need to add it a width. I need to give it a width of give it any width you want to give. I'm giving my own a width of 130 this time around. So you can give it a height of give it a height of probably 100 pixel. Remember, you can also give it, just play around with the code. Now I'm closing it now. Now there's something I'm going to call out now. Something I'm going to call for. I'm going to call a drop shadow. Okay, I'm going to have a drop shadow. Now there's something I want to do here. Notice I need to call for the drop shadow here. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to bring for the drop. I can add the drop shadow. Okay, let's say drop shadow. Now there's something I need to do. Sorry. So we are going to talk about filter. So we are talking about filter, right? So let's talk about filter. The first filter I want to use here is what? See the various filter. You have the blur filter, the brightness filter, the contrast filter, the drop shadow filter, the grayscale. I want to talk about the drop shadow filter. So I'm going to say let it drop shadow by 5 pixel. 5 pixel. That's the 5 pixel top. Let it drop shadow by 5 pixel, 9 by 5 pixel to the right. And let it drop let's also drop by 2 pixel to the bottom, and let it drop by and finally what? The blur. So we have said it before. We said the first one is a 5 pixel. 5 pixel stands for the X offset, and 9 pixel here. 9 pixels stand for the Y offset, and 2 pixels stand for the what? The blur property. And now we have the blue, which is the color. So that is under filter. That is under CSS filters. So that's why I had to use the filter word. I brought for the filter property. Then these are the values under it. So I need to now save my document, and let me refresh this. I see what happened. This is the shadow. So we have actually what? Dropped that shadow. We dropped the shadow by how many? Is what we have done. So play around with it, please. Just play around, change it to the various areas you want to drop your shadow. Maybe you can change it. Probably say, okay, you want to drop shadow by, let's say you change that to maybe 5. You save and see what it does. Then you do what's good for you. Okay, you just play around with it. You can actually change the color to red or blue. I'm trying to, this video will not be too lengthy. I'll change the color to that. So the next thing we can also do is that, so don't forget to always use the WebKit or the mocks, because it might not actually run on your browser. So you might need to use that the mocks or the WebKit. So the mocks and the WebKit, what it simply means is using this. I'll specify that again. Using this, the mouse, or using the WebKit. The WebKit. So use the WebKit, then you add now your filter. So this WebKit will simply mean that in case your browser have not been updated, you will save one on your browser. Okay, so let's look at another property. Let's look at about another filter property. Let's talk about the grayscale. The grayscale. So I will not change anything here. I will still come back here. So the grayscale now, what the grayscale will do is that I'm still on that grayscale. Grayscale. That's the grayscale. I want the grayscale to be 100%. I want the grayscale to be 100%. 100%. So if I save that now, that's what grayscale. Okay, I using the grayscale. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is, so that you can be able to see it more better, I'm going to increase the size of this image. I'm going to make it to be 190. So the width to be 160, and the height should be probably 180. So you can be able to visualize it well. So if I refresh this, so that's what actually happens here. So you can see it there. It has gone grayscale. Now the next thing I can have, the next property here I can have, let's move to the next filter property, which is sepia. So I'm going to use sepia property. So I'm going to change all this grayscale. I'm going to have sepia. I'm going to save this. Okay, this is the sepia property. You can see it has become as if I've taken away the light and brought down the sunset color. That's sepia. So play around with that sepia. The next one I can have probably here is the saturate function. So I can add a saturate function. Let's say saturate. But oh, sorry, I didn't take away that step. Yeah, I have the saturate function. So I can say saturate, but I'm not going to say saturate 100%, because saturation, it means simply you're adding trying to add color to balance up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say probably saturate by 2.5. So with saturation, I don't necessarily need to use the percentage. I see that is saturate. Okay, you have seen all of this color effect if you are used to photography. I say saturate by 5%, by 5, you're going to be like this. Saturation is simply by value. It's almost similar to enhance. For those of you who are using Google Photos, you have an option that says enhance your photo. So I can saturate by maybe 1.2 or 1.3. So it's just like saturation is almost like an enhanced version. Okay, so that is that. Okay, the next one we need to look at is a hue rotate function. So let me see the hue rotate. So you can somehow try to rotate your photo. Let me add that, the hue rotate function. So I can let me rotate by 180 degree. Don't forget to put your DEG. DEG means degree. That's your hue rotate. So I'm going to save this now and refresh. It has tried to rotate. Okay, so it has hue rotate. That means you're trying to rotate the color that is found within the image. You're trying to hue rotate that color. You're trying to filter and rotate the color. So play around with that same code. Okay, so now if I use now one thing we should need to understand about hue rotate is that the hue rotate applies colors based on the color cycle. There's a color cycle, and the color cycle says that it takes an angle of rotation at its parameters. Now let me just explain something to you about the color cycle. What the color cycle does is that 240 degree means blue. Now if I add 240 degree here, the color cycle specifies that at 240 degree there is what the color blue. Now if I save 240 degrees, it's going to become color blue. Blue effect has been added here, but it's not really visible, but blue effect has been added. Now if I say color 0, you're going to be right, something right. Going to be right, yeah. Okay, so that is that. So just play around with the code. So I can use maybe 300 degrees. So I can use probably 300 degrees here. 300. I can go with 300 degrees. I save that. So there's that. The color actually changed, but it might not be visible here. Okay, let me see. Let me change this image to a darker image so we can be able to try to visualize it. Okay, the image didn't come out. Okay, why is that? The second image, I was trying to bring out the second image, it didn't actually come out. So another way of bringing out the image is to just go to that image, look for property. Now copy the name of the image as it is, like this. Just copy the way it is. Yeah, make sure that it is called .jpg. Now just copy the way it is. Come back to your code editor and just put it there the way it is. Then save it now. Try to refresh your page again. It should come out. Okay, so that's that. So are you seeing? Okay, so let's go to the last one, which is the invert property. Invert. I believe those of you who are using your Android phone, there's a property in your phone called invert. So let's see. I have to use the invert property here. So invert. So I can invert now with invert property. I use percentage. Invert by 70%. I see what happened. Okay, I see what happened. I can invert by 90%. See, what if I invert by 40%? What happens? That's what happens. Okay, so please play around with that. We have come to the end of CSS and the end of Css3. So please play around with the code you have seen so far. Do some more research, try to do things, trying to apply all the functions I've told you. Try to maybe apply them to your navigation bar, the one we earlier did in the earlier video. So by next video, we are going to talk about brief introduction, brief lessons on JavaScript. Then we can use what we have done with JavaScript. We'll talk about event handlers, event functions. We'll use them to add up to what we have done. So we're going to be working on a project. So for now, we're going to work on a project. So it's either we're going to create a quiz app using everything we have studied so far from HTML, CSS, and what we'll study in JavaScript. The next video will be coming up shortly. I'll upload it. Try to make sure that as you watch, you practice. Give yourself time to practice. You can only become a good programmer by practicing. You don't become a good programmer by watching me code. There's no amount of watching you code. Watch me code gonna make you a good programmer. So try to practice everything you have studied here. Try to practice even more. Try to practice new one. So the assignment I'm giving to you who is viewing this programming lesson right now is that try to add a video and an audio to HTML. Go and research on that. Add that. It will make you, the more examples you solve, the more things you practice, the more you try out your hand, the more it makes you a better programmer to take on projects in the future. Thank you so much for watching this video. Please try to hit me up for any comments you have. Try to hit me up. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So I'll be ending the video right now. Have a great day. Thank you so much. Have a